Standard is about to be bigger than ever, and it has a lot of powerful cards within it. So I thought it'd be fun to look at the top 10 most expensive cards that are legal in the format right now. Let's jump right into this, starting with number 10, that being Portal to Phyrexia. The card is currently going for $19.13, and it's a 9-drop artifact that when it enters the battlefield makes each opponent sacrifice 3 creatures. Then, at the beginning of your upkeep, you get to put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control, and then it becomes a Phyrexian in addition to its other types. Even though it's pretty pricey, this actually doesn't see a lot of play in Standard, and most of its value is coming from other formats, where it's able to be cheated out really easily and then is able to devastate your opponent's board and then give you recurring value. You know, expensive cards can see play, but 9 mana is just so much mana that it pretty much only sees play in places that can cheat it out, and there just aren't that many cards in Standard that can just cheat an artifact out. But if you can, it's incredibly powerful. Next up, number 9 is Atraxa Grand Unifier. Currently going for $19.60, this is a 7-cost green, white, blue, and black legendary creature that has been dominating tons of formats. It has flying, vigilance, death touch, and lifelink, and is a 7/7. And then when it enters the battlefield, you reveal the top 10 cards of your library, and for each card type, you may put a card of that type from among the revealed cards into your hand. Then you put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. This is an insane card, and it sees play in Standard and Ramp decks, in Reanimator decks, it sees play in older formats like Modern and Pioneer and Vintage and Legacy. It sees play almost everywhere because it enters the battlefield and is going to draw you a ton of cards. This card is compared to Griselbrand, which was considered one of Magic's most overpowered creatures in the entire game. And so the fact that it's being compared to that shows just how powerful it really is. Overall, it makes sense that it has its price tag. Next up, number 8, the Wandering Emperor. Currently going for $20.09, this is a 4-cost legendary planeswalker with 3 loyalty and flash. And it says, as long as the Wandering Emperor entered the battlefield this turn, you may activate her loyalty abilities anytime you could cast an instant. And then you can +1 to put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature. It gains first strike until end of turn. You can -1 to create a 2/2 white samurai creature token with vigilance, and you can -2 to exile target tapped creature and you gain 2 life. This card just does a ton. It sees play in Standard in a lot of decks, especially white, like aggressive decks want this card, as it not only creates creatures, it also boosts up your creatures, gives them first strike, but then is also instant speed removal that then keeps generating value. It's one of the best white removal spells we've seen in quite some time, as you can ambush your opponents with it, then guaranteed get to activate the Wandering Emperor again to then get counters and first strike, and then potentially keep creating like 2/2s or keep exiling things. It's one of those things that your opponent has to answer, and even if they do, it gets amazing value right as it enters. Overall, it's a pretty insane card, and it justifies its price tag because of it. Next up, number 7 is Sheoldred. This is currently going for $20.13, and it's a 5-cost black legendary creature for 5 with menace, and when it enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a non-token creature or planeswalker. Then, for 5 mana, you get to exile Sheoldred and then return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control. Activate only as a sorcery and only if an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard. This card is pretty crazy, and when it transforms, it turns into the True Scriptures, which is a saga that lets you destroy up to 1 target creature or planeswalker for each opponent. You get to make each opponent discard 3 cards and mill 3 cards, and then you get to Rise of the Dark Realm and put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control. Of the Praetors from the March of the Machine cycle, Sheoldred consistently gets the most value, it seems like, because she gets a lot of her front value right when she enters the battlefield, making each person sacrifice something, and then has that threat of activation, which is actually fairly easy to activate. You know, some of the conditions were pretty hard. Casting 3 spells in 1 turn is hard, but just having opponents have cards in graveyards is really easy, and the backside just utterly devastates the board. It doesn't see a lot of Standard play, but in the formats it does see play, it can be a powerhouse, and therefore is going for $20.09. Next up, number 6 is Fable of the Mirrorbreaker. This is a 3-cost red enchantment saga. It's currently going for $21.14, and it says, first, you create a 2/2 red goblin shaman creature token with, whenever this creature attacks, create a treasure token. Then step 2, you may discard up to 2 cards. If you do, draw that many cards. Then 3, you can exile the saga and return it to the battlefield transformed under your control. Then it becomes Reflection of Kikijiki, which is an enchantment creature 2/2 that lets you pay 1 and tap to create a token that's a copy of another target non-legendary creature you control, except it has haste, and then you sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. This card is utterly insane. For 3 mana, you get a creature, you get to ramp with said creature, you get to fill your graveyard, and you get to filter your hand to look for the answers you're looking for, or combo pieces, or just refine your hand a little bit. And then you get a very good creature that lets you reuse your other creatures. And if you don't even have other creatures, it can at least make copies of the 2/2 goblin that it created. This card just does a lot, and pretty much any deck that runs red is going to want at least one of those things, and because of that, it sees play in almost every red deck in Standard. It's an insane card, and that's why it's going for $21.14. Next up, number 5 is Mondrak Glory Dominus. This card is currently going for $24.17, and it's a 4-cost legendary creature, Phyrexian Horror, 4/4. And it says, if one or more tokens would be created under your control, twice that many of those tokens are created instead. Then you can pay 1 and 2 Phyrexian white mana, as well as sacrifice 2 other artifacts and or creatures to put an indestructible counter on Mondrak. This card is utterly insane. Things that double are inherently very powerful, and this is a card that says double your tokens, which is extra good. The thing is, this does not really see play in Standard, and so while it is a Standard legal card, it is not Standard propping up that price. This card primarily sees play in Commander, but it can see play in really any token strategies. It is a little expensive for older formats, so it's typically, again, seen as just a Commander card, but it is a powerful one, and it was one of the most expensive cards from Phyrexia All Be One when it launched, and it still retains a pretty high price because of that. Next up, number 4 is Elesh Norn, Mother of Machines. This is a 5-cost white legendary creature, Phyrexian Praetor, 4/7, that's going for $27.28. It has Vigilance, and it doubles all ETB abilities of permanents entering the battlefield under your control, and stops enter the battlefield abilities of your opponents. It's a very powerful card, but again, not one that really sees play in Standard. We've seen this push recently where cards in Standard sets are aimed at other formats, specifically Commander, and this is a card that is an amazing hate bearer. It doubles up your ETBs, giving you a ton of value. It just doesn't make a lot of sense in the current Standard meta, and so because of that, it really just doesn't see play. So it is expensive, but it's not because of Standard. We all know that Elesh Norn is good, so I'm not really going to waste more of your time. Let's move on to the next one. Next up, number 3 is Boseiju, Who Endures. It's currently going for $31.70, and it's a legendary land that lets you tap to add green, or if it's in your hand, you can pay 2 and discard it to destroy target artifact, enchantment, or non-basic land an opponent controls. That player may search their library for a land with a basic land type, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each legendary creature you control. This card is another insane one, but not because it generates lots of value. A lot of the time, this will just be a land that enters the battlefield untapped that taps for green. But you can also just pay 1 and a green to destroy target artifact, enchantment, or non-basic land. And it's one of those cards that there is pretty much no cost to putting it in your deck, especially if you only put 1 of them, because it doesn't enter the battlefield tapped, and its only downside is missing the basic land type and being legendary. And so unless you care that it doesn't have the forest land type, this should just replace a forest in every green deck. And because of that, it's going for $31.70, and sees play in multitudes of formats like Standard, Modern, Pioneer, all of them. Alrighty, next up, number 2 is Nissa, Resurgent Animist. This is a 3-cost green 3/3 that's currently going for $40.62. It says, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, add 1 mana of any color. Then, if this is the second time this ability is resolved this turn, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal an elf or elemental card. Put that card into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. This is essentially Lotus Cobra, which is an insane card already, but stacked on it is a card draw ability that helps you draw elves and elementals, which are really good in landfall strategies. Because of that, it's an expensive card. But you add on the fact that it was a mythic in Aftermath, kind of a bad set. It only has 50 cards, there's no commons, you can't draft it. It's going to be a card that is pretty expensive unless more Aftermath gets opened, and because of that, I think this is going to only go up in price unless Aftermath gets opened because this goes up so much in price, but we'll just have to wait and see. Lastly, number 1 is Sheoldred the Apocalypse. I think surprising no one, this card is going for $63.77, and it's a 4-cost 4/5 with Death Touch, and says, whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life, and whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life. This card is insane. For 4 mana, you get a 4/5 with Death Touch, which is a decent body, but then you are going to gain at least 2 life every turn, and your opponent is going to lose the game in 10 turns, assuming they don't draw any other cards. This is a card that has to be answered by your opponent, otherwise you will just win the game. And at 4 mana, that is a steep ask. Because of that, it goes in every black deck in every format, it seems like. And especially in a lower power format like Standard, Sheoldred sees a lot of play with the supporting cast of cards being so powerful in red and black right now. We know that there's a ban coming up, and I'm expecting something to happen, but I don't see Sheoldred being banned. I see her supporting cast of cards being banned instead, but we'll just have to wait and see. This card is insane, and it's an insane price. Alrighty guys, that is it for this video. If you found it helpful, hit that like button and subscribe, and if you want to see more content, check out these 2 videos here that YouTube thinks you'll like. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.